Mile High, hello everybody in Broncos country, and welcome into another episode of the Dove Valley Deep Divers podcast. I'm your host, Lance Sanderson, and joining me, as always, is your Denver Broncos insider and Mile High Huddle's senior NFL draft analyst, Erick Trickel. Erick, Broncos got the bye week coming up this week, so not a whole lot to talk about regarding the Broncos as far as their upcoming game, but we do got a pretty good show scheduled out. We're going to do some stuff with the NFL draft, but before we get started, Erick, how you doing today, man?
I'm doing pretty good. Just excited that it's the weekend finally. Been a rough day at work. Do get an extra day at work next week, though, so there's good for that extra money in my pocket. But, yeah, just excited to be sitting down and talking about the draft and talking about this big board I did with Carl. Much thanks to Carl for joining me with that. It was a lot of fun sitting there going through it and hearing his opinions. And I think the best thing about it, too, was just how similar our opinions on these players were. There really wasn't a whole lot of just varying opinions on it, and what opinions there were, we were able to hash out and just come to agreements about orders of players and gave our takes, and excited to do that again and go a little bit more depth about why these players fell where they did.
Yeah, this is an amazing piece, guys. It's titled the Denver Broncos Top 50 Big Board for the 2020 NFL Draft, and this is a piece that is kind of highlighting what the guys have going for the Broncos to target in the first round, specifically the top 50 guys, specifically to the Broncos board, not specifically to anybody else's board or like a general overall big board. These are the guys that the Broncos have, or should be targets for the Broncos in the first couple of rounds, so it's a very interesting piece. It's very well done. Carl and Erick did a really good job, so guys, you really need to go to Mile High Huddle and check this out. And today we're going to kind of go over and get a little bit more in depth. It's really brief. Limited to the amount of time and making it a long read, so we're going to go in depth on this, and we're going to get a lot of Erick's takes and some of mine as well, but we're going to get started here in just a minute, guys, so here we go.
This is the Overtime Podcast Network.
All right, guys, so today we're breaking down this top 50 big board that Erick Trickel and Carl Dumler at Mile High Huddle have procured for us, and they worked over this for the past couple of days anyways that I know of, in their own private group chat. And starting us off with, we're going to do this in three kind of segments here. We're going to do the top 10, then we're going to do 11 to 20, and then in the final part we're going to do 21 through 50, and just kind of give you some rapid fire takes and everything like that. But starting off with the top 10, and Erick, this is a guy that is probably the biggest need other than at the quarterback position, and we really don't know with Drew Lock, so this is kind of altering things just a little bit, but the top two guys you have are Andrew Thomas, the offensive tackle, left tackle for the Georgia Bulldogs, and then Tristan Wirfs, the right tackle / left tackle. He's currently playing right tackle for the Iowa Hawkeyes, but he's a guy that has played left tackle this year and has played very well. Now, those are your top two guys. What is the biggest reason for that?
Well, the biggest reason is just the obvious, is the need. Denver is basically, they don't have a franchise left tackle, and either of these guys could potentially be it, especially Andrew Thomas. He has that mold, he has the tools, he has all the traits of being a franchise left tackle. Plug him in from day one, and he's your starter for the next 15-plus years. Tristan Wirfs, he's a little bit younger. He still needs a little bit more work, but he has that potential to be a franchise left tackle. And if he doesn't work out there, you could easily move him to right tackle or either guard spot. He's just so versatile. He works in the scheme. Coming from Iowa was also a big boost, in my opinion, of him as well, because Iowa has a good track record of getting offensive linemen ready for the NFL game. And Carl kind of shared the similar thoughts on that, about basically the need and the scheme fits and all that stuff like that between these two guys. And that's basically is exactly why they were lined up the number 2 spots. It's the biggest need that the Broncos have, and they are both such good prospects.
Right, and it's not just necessarily at the left tackle position, it's also at the right tackle position. And yes, we do have Juwan James, but the injury issues that we're seeing with him, the money is going to keep him here for a couple of years, but I mean, there's issues there. There's issues with depth. I mean, Garrett Bowles has been struggling this year, and he's obviously going to be on his way out the door here directly after probably next season. So if not before next season. So the Broncos have a need at the offensive tackle position, and these are the top two guys. I do really enjoy watching whatever film I do get to see from Tristan Wirfs right now, and Nick being a big Iowa Hawkeyes fan, Nick Kendall, our colleague over at Mile High Huddle, him being a huge Iowa Hawkeyes fan, you see a lot of that on his Twitter, and that Tristan Wirfs is actually very big and mobile, 20 years old, so he's very young, he's got a long ways to go, but he's still showing those elite traits. Now, moving forward just a little bit, we're gonna kind of highlight, and also Nick did a very good article, and this went up earlier today. Denver Broncos. Here's why drafting a quarterback in round 1 should still be on the table for the Denver Broncos in 2020. Now, the thing is, with Drew Lock in the fold, I kind of disagree that it's going to be necessarily a huge need, but you definitely need to talk about the quarterback position. It's the most prescient position in all of the NFL and all of sports, actually. And we're going to jump over Chase Young. We'll come back to him here in a minute. But the next two guys at number 4 and number 5, you have Joe Burrow, the quarterback of the LSU Tigers, and Justin Herbert, a guy who John Elway was enamored with a couple of years ago and also last year, the quarterback from the Oregon Ducks. So why do you guys have these, other than the obvious, the quarterback is the penultimate position in the NFL, why do you guys have these guys in the top 5, given the fact that they have taken a second-round pick in Drew Lock last year?
Well, the biggest is that quarterback is that franchise spot. You either have a quarterback or you don't. There is really no in-between. And the Broncos, they don't know if the Drew Lock is that quarterback of the future, which, yes, he does need to see the field. They do need to get some answers there. But until we get those answers, you have to be talking about a quarterback. You have to get that guy. As for why these two specifically, I know that there's one quarterback that a lot of people have. He's their top quarterback for a lot of boards, and that's the Alabama quarterback. But these two guys, they are such perfect scheme fits for what the Broncos want to do, especially Justin Herbert. Like, he is basically, if you're thinking about a quarterback to fit this scheme, he is what comes to mind. Are there issues there? Of course there are. I don't like the fact that he hasn't really taken huge progress this year. I mean, there's been a little bit, but not enough to really move the needle, in my opinion, of him. And then Joe Burrow, he's taken a huge step this year. He does so well under pressure and escaping pressure, moving around in the pocket and delivering nice, well-placed throws down the field. And that's one thing that, with this offensive line, that you have to factor in is until this offensive line is fixed, it's going to be an issue. And until we see it fixed, it's still going to be a concern. And so that is why, for me anyways, I put Joe Burrow above Justin Herbert, is that added benefit of, while they both fit the scheme, Joe Burrow, I feel, offers a little bit more in that pocket awareness, avoiding pressure, than Justin Herbert does.
Right, and earlier today I was watching a part of the interruption on ESPN, and they had David Pollack on, who's one of their college football analysts, and he was talking specifically the LSU versus Alabama game that we're going to get to see on Saturday. And the one thing that he did bring up with Joe Burrow is the efficiencies that he has throwing the ball over the middle of the field, and that's something that is going to definitely be a big key for him moving forward into the NFL level. Is that wrong? No,
that is exactly right, is that there are some issues there with Joe Burrow. I mean, for as much progress as he's shown, he is looking like that one-year wonder, and you have to wonder why that is. Where were these traits that we weren't seeing last year were for him to really come out of nowhere? That is a huge concern, and over the middle of the field, and there's a couple others that I have, and sometimes when he's not feeling pressured, his placement can be a little off, which is very concerning, because typically when you're under pressure, your placement's off. But with Joe Burrow, it almost seems to be a little bit of the opposite, almost. So that's definitely a concern there. But yeah, I definitely love the fact that he's really progressed this year, and despite his inefficiencies, that he's a great quarterback prospect. But I also come back to the fact of he is a one-year wonder, and how many one-year wonder quarterbacks in college really pan out in the NFL? Not many. It's very rare. So that's just another concern with him.
Yeah, and speaking specifically to one-year wonders, how has Mitchell Trubisky worked out, number 2 overall pick to the Chicago Bears? But anyways, moving forward, now we've got a couple of playmakers here. We're going to actually backtrack here. Excuse me. We're going to backtrack, and there's a big situation going on up in Ohio State right now with Buckeyes defensive end Chase Young, and this is probably the top prospect in the entire National Football League. And you guys have this young man at number 3 overall on the big board, and the biggest reason for that is, yes, he is the top prospect on the big board, but the Broncos already have Bradley Chubb and Von Miller in tow. Adding Chase Young would essentially be more a luxury pick than an actual need pick, so he's not drop down a couple notches. But something that everyone needs to be aware of, if they haven't actually seen this over the past couple of days, specifically on Friday, Chase Young was suspended by the NCAA because he took a loan from a family friend. He paid it back, and this was when he was a freshman at Ohio State. He took a loan from one of his family friends, and that is an NCAA violation that they are looking into right now with Ohio State and the NCAA. So if Chase Young is deemed ineligible to play and is suspended for the rest of this year, that's going to take a hit to his draft stock. I mean, it's nothing that the Broncos necessarily need to be concerned with, but it is something that needs to be talked about. Now, Chase Young, as far as a prospect goes, is most certainly the best pass rusher in the NFL draft this year, hands down. Eric, go ahead and talk about him.
I don't think he's just the best pass rusher. I think he's the best prospect. He is so good on the field, and if he ends up missing more than just this next game for Ohio State, I don't think it's really going to have an impact on his draft position at all. I think the biggest impact of it is where teams land. Because with the quarterback class, with the Alabama quarterback, with Joe Burrow and Justin Herbert, whom we've already talked about, is they're going to potentially push him down. Andrew Thomas and Tristan Wirfs, they're potentially going to push him down. It all depends on where teams fall. He is the best pass rusher. He is the best prospect. He definitely deserves to go number one. And basically, him being the best prospect is why he's there at number 3 for us. But also because that whole thing of you can never have enough pass rushers, Von Miller's age, and Von Miller being expensive. And Denver, hey, they may end up deciding they want to move on from him either this offseason or next year. So who knows how much longer Von Miller has in Denver, so his time may be limited. So that's another reason why, despite having the pass rushers, we still put Chase Young very high. But yeah, as for the whole issue, I think it's a little bit stupid. But I don't think it's really going to affect his draft stock overall, just because of how good of a prospect he is. It really is just going to come down to where teams land, what teams land where, all that stuff, all that jazz. Because if the first 3 teams are, say, Miami and Cincinnati and Tennessee or Tampa Bay, they're all going to be looking at a quarterback more so than adding a pass rusher because they don't have a quarterback. So that's the biggest variable there for Chase Young, more so. And it's just not, again, the whole situation that's going on. It sucks. It's stupid. And I don't think that teams are really going to focus in on that as being a major red flag for him.
No, and they shouldn't. They definitely shouldn't. I mean, the talent on the tape that you have seen thus far over the past couple of years, and specifically this year there's people talking about him in the Heisman race right now. Like, he is the best player in college football. Anyway, so moving forward here, guys, we're down to number 6 overall right here, and this is a guy that I am head over heels in love with the explosive playmaking ability that it has, especially with the yards after the catch, and the ability that he does have with the football in his hands. And this is Jerry Jeudy, and the next guy we're going to kind of talk about with as well is also CeeDee Lamb. So Jerry Jeudy, wide receiver out of Alabama, CeeDee Lamb, the wide receiver out of the Oklahoma Sooners. Jerry Jeudy is one of the best wide receiver prospects that I think I've seen in the last at least 5 years. And that might even be a stretch to go even further back than that. This guy is explosive. He has great hands, a very good route runner, very crisp with the football in his hands, and does explosive things after the catch. Now, at number 6 overall on the big board, that's extremely high for a wide receiver. So Eric, I really want your take. Why Jerry Jeudy and CeeDee Lamb at 6 and 7?
They're just great prospects at the wide receiver position. And for the Denver Broncos, I think wide receiver is a bigger need than people want to admit. I mean, we've seen a little bit of Tim Patrick, but we have no idea what progression he's taken for this year. He's still on injured reserve. We don't know what progression he's going to take this year or progression he's going to have next year. Cortland Sutton's emerged, but what other receivers do they have? Deshaun Hamilton? Okay, he's good in his role, but has he stepped up? No. Fred Brown? He hasn't stepped up. Have we seen Juwan Renfree? He's only played 15 snaps. We haven't seen him. Where's the other receiver coming from? Because Denver can't keep winning games like they did win, like how they won against the Browns, where they only completed a pass to one other receiver besides Cortland Sutton, and that's Deontay Spencer. And hey, he's looking great and explosive, but he also fumbled the ball. So there's that issue there, is they don't have another dynamic receiver next to Cortland Sutton. And these two players, again, they're great. They're great prospects at the receiver position. I love their route running. I love their big play ability that they have. They're them being so dynamic as they are. Absolutely love their skills. And with the need that Denver has for them, with the need of them trying to take this offense to the next level, especially if Noah Fant steps up after this year, like, this offense could be scary good if they get that other dynamic receiver, and that pushed these two receivers up for me.
And that was something that I had spoken. I commented on Nick's article about drafting a quarterback in the first round must still be on the table. And what I had said was, if you do, go with the quarterback, you're risking out on hitting on these premier left tackle prospects. You're missing out on these premier wide receiver prospects like Jerry Jeudy and CeeDee Lamb, and then Henry Ruggs, the third out of Alabama as well. There's an opportunity here to build this roster, build it around Drew Lock, and then move yourself forward. And if Drew Lock does prove himself to not be the answer in 2020, that means you're losing football games. So if Drew Lock is proven to not be the answer, you're going to be around the top 10 again next year, in a very quarterback-rich class that has guys like Clemson's Trevor Lawrence and Ohio State's Justin Fields. So there's an opportunity here. Take advantage of the good class that has big players at your biggest weaknesses. Build the roster around Drew Lock. Make sure that he is not the guy. Actually have a true development plan in place, and then move forward if you have to in 2021. Now, to close this out before we hit our first break, guys, we do have, number 8, 9, and 10 on your guys' big board. And Derek Brown, the defensive lineman from Auburn. I'm not sure a whole bunch about him. I know he's an interior defensive line prospect. Isaiah Simmons, the linebacker out of Clemson, and Jeffrey Okudah, the cornerback out of from Ohio State, who is widely perceived as the top cornerback in this class. Now, specifically to Vic Fangio's defense, why do these players make the most sense, and why are they inside your top 10, Eric?
Well, all three of them are excellent players. I absolutely love watching all three of them. Derek Brown, part of the reason why he's up so high is the need. You have Shelby Harris, Adam Gotsis, and Derek Wolfe all set to be free agents after this year. So that's pushing defensive line way up their need board. And he's just a great prospect. He's so athletic. And I think it was against LSU where there were multiple plays where they were using 3 offensive linemen to just slow him down. They weren't stopping him. They were just slowing him down. Like, he was so dominant in that game that they really did have to use 3 blockers just to slow him down. As for Isaiah Simmons, is one thing when watching this defenses that I've noticed is Alexander Johnson, he's not being used in coverage. He's got a lot of issues in coverage. And we see that when the few times he does drop back into coverage. Todd Davis, he's good in the role he's playing at, but they're lacking a coverage athletic linebacker, and that's what Isaiah Simmons would bring to them. He's a safety linebacker hybrid that Denver needs, because if they're going to continue to blitz Alexander Johnson, which they completely should, then they need that guy to help cover up in coverage that they were missing out without having that extra linebacker. I think that obviously Alexander Johnson, he still has room for growth there, but until we see it, we can't count on it. That's the biggest thing, is you can't ever count on development until you start seeing it. And I think that's a lot of mistakes that teams make, as I digress from the point here a little bit, is they bet on development when they're not seeing it. And you have to find the fine line there. At what point is it you're betting on development becoming a hindrance compared to being something good? Like, are you seeing the flashes or are you not? And if Alexander Johnson does turn it around in coverage, great. They have another athletic guy to put next to him, and they can really be effective in coverage against tight ends and running backs from the linebacker position. As for Okudah, top corner, he is probably a top 5 or top 6 player on my board overall. But when it comes to the Broncos, when I watch him, I see him being more effective in a man coverage scheme in the NFL. And while Denver does run a little bit of both, they are primarily a zone team. And there are some more issues that I see with his play when he's playing in zone. A little bit click and close issues. He's a great athlete, but at times that he's just a little bit late getting to the catch point, or times where he just seems not necessarily lost, but just a little bit out of position in his zone. So those are a couple concerns that I have with him that fell down the board. And I know I was actually surprised to learn this, that Carl and I actually were in agreement here with him about his fit with the scheme because of the fact that he seems more man than more zone coverage corner.
Right. Okay. I mean, you're the expert here. You're much more into this, and you and Carl did a great job on this. But I mean, to me, the cornerback need with Chris Harris Jr. and the contract situation surrounding Chris Harris Jr. To me, quarterback is definitely a need. And the last 5 or 6 guys that we've talked about with the wide receivers, Derek Brown, Isaiah Simmons, and Jeffrey Okudah, those are all big needs for this team. And if it comes down to picking one of those guys over a quarterback, I would rather go in that direction. That's just my personal take on this entire situation. But guys, we're running a little long here. We do got to take a quick break. So I do want to remind you, if you guys got the bye week blues and you're tired of not seeing any Denver Broncos content coming out, go over to milehighhuddle.com and check out all of our written content on your Denver Broncos. At the Huddle website, you'll get breaking news and analysis, in-depth film pieces and opinion articles, and a whole bunch of information on your Denver Broncos. Also, make sure to create your own personalized profile. Hit up the comment section to voice your own opinions on any topics that you agree or disagree with. It's completely free, it's easy to use, and we all love to discuss Broncos football with our readers. So you guys can also sit in with us during the live game threads to talk your thoughts on how the Broncos are performing in their ongoing game. Now this week, again, we're on the bye, so that's going to be kind of crappy. But anyways, so with that, guys, we got to step away right quick. We'll be right back. Sit tight.
This is the Overtime Podcast Network.
All right, guys, welcome back to Dove Valley Deep Divers. Today we're going over the top 50 board that Erick, Trickel, and Carl Dumler have comprised between the two of them for the top 50 players for the Broncos to consider as their big board for the 2020 NFL Draft. And now we're getting into the 11 to 20 players. We're going to have to kind of pick this up just a little bit. And to start off, number 11 and number 12, you got number 13, you have three Alabama Crimson Tide players. The first one being wide receiver Henry Ruggs, offensive lineman Alex Leatherwood, and quarterback Tua Tagovailoa, who most consider is the top prospect at the quarterback position in the 2020 NFL Draft. Now, to me, Henry Ruggs needs to be the guy if you're going to talk, and Alex Leatherwood is a big nod here. I'm not necessarily sold on the quarterback position. I've been very vocal about that, but Henry Ruggs is a player that sings to me, and it's a big need that the Broncos have at the wide receiver position because he is a very explosive, very fast playmaker with the football in his hands. He is Alabama's deep threat. He is the guy that when they want to push the ball down the field, Henry Ruggs is the guy, and that is one of the biggest needs that the Broncos offense has as far as their weaponries goes, as compared to, like, say, a left tackle or interior offensive lineman. Alex Leatherwood looks to be a rising prospect as a left tackle. But Henry Ruggs, this is a guy that I really want to hear your thoughts on, Erick. Go ahead.
I really love his game, and it's not just that deep threat that he is. He is very capable of taking short catches and using his speed and making huge plays out of it. I absolutely love his game. I love his tape, and a lot of people question how speedsters like him, those deep threats, translate to the NFL. But I don't think there's going to be an issue. As long as he goes to the right scheme that's going to use his talents the right way, I think he's going to be great. And I really love his tape. I love his speed overall, and I can't wait to see him at the athletic testing. As for the other two, what dropped Tua down a little bit for us, at least for me anyways, is I don't view him as big of a scheme fit for the Denver Broncos. Plus, I think we actually did hear John Elway when just after he became general manager, talking about left-handed quarterbacks in the NFL. If not him, there was another general manager that was talking about it too. And they talk about how you have to really change your scheme around a little bit for it and flip it and all that stuff like that. And I think that Denver is they're working on building their scheme as it is. They have a bunch of right-handed quarterbacks. They don't want to just go flip everything over for the Alabama quarterback. For Tua, I'm not even going to try to say his last name. But that's one reason why he fell down the board a little bit for me. And Alex Leatherwood, I like his play. He's definitely rising, and I can't wait to go back and dig into Alabama tape some more after the season. For right now, I'm kind of done watching tape until January, just to give myself a little bit of a break for the holidays. But digging back into him, I definitely like him, and I like his counterpart at right tackle. And it's going to be interesting to see where they actually land, because for my personal board, Leatherwood, my number 4 tackle, and my number 5 tackle are all so very closely graded that there could easily be some changes. But I really like what I've seen of Leatherwood so far.
Was Alex Leatherwood playing on the interior of the offensive line last year?
Yes.
I believe he made the move to left tackle this year.
He was recruited to play left tackle, but they had Jonah at left tackle, so they plugged him in at guard. I can't remember if it was right guard or left guard. And then after that year, after he left, they moved him back to left tackle. But he was a 5-star recruit at left tackle or offensive tackle.
And he also played very well at left guard. I think it was left guard is where he played last
played
season.
Very well.
So He played very well. So you've got a position versatility guy here, and if the Broncos can manage to nab him, say they trade back just a little bit, try to gain even some more picks or whatever, and they decide to go with Alex Leatherwood and say like the mid-teens, early 20s in that kind of an area, you've got a potential left tackle prospect of the future, and you have a player that you can plug in at right or left guard as well. So the position versatility to me rises that value for him just even that little bit much more. So moving forward now, you've got Christian Fulton, the cornerback from the LSU Tigers. I'm not really very familiar with him yet. I do have a lot of work to do in as far as my film study goes. I typically don't get started on that until after the season anyways. But a guy that I want to talk about here in another Iowa Hawkeye here is edge player, defensive end, specifically more towards like a 4-3 defensive end, AJ Epinesa. This is a guy that was on pace to be a top 5 pick this year, and I mean he very well could continue to be that. He's been inconsistent, a lot of flashes in his play. You guys have him at, I believe, number 16 right now. Let's talk about AJ Epinesa just a little bit, and it's kind of the same thing with Chase Young. I mean the need's not there, but the fact that you guys have him in the top 20 right now for the Broncos as far as their big board, what sings to you about AJ Epinesa?
Well, first, just to go over Fulton real quick, I like his fit in the Broncos scheme, but I have seen some tackling issues there that dropped him a little bit, but corner is still a important position and a position of need for the Broncos. That's why he was up there. Creed Humphrey, he's the guy that comes between Fulton and Epinesa. Really love him on the offensive line. I think he's going to be a long-time center, 15-plus years starter, and playing at a high level. Absolutely love his play. But with Epinesa, it's been a rough year for him. So it's hard to really evaluate this year because he still flashes, but you're not seeing it with consistency. So that's going to be a concern that teams are going to have come draft time, is where was that consistency? And you have to look back to his year last year where he truly was dominant. And his tape there was great. It wasn't just flashes. There was a lot more consistency to it. But it also helped teams change how they play against him, which you're seeing that. More doubles, more chips, and that's really affecting him. With the Broncos is he's listed as an edge, but he plays pretty heavy, and I think that you can easily add up about another 10 pounds or so to him and play him on that defensive line with the Broncos and have a guy who can be like that Derek Wolfe type role, that Adam Gotsis type role, good against the run, but offers a little bit more as a pass rusher. And that's what I'm seeing in him. But again, it's going to be rough for him. I wouldn't be surprised if he still fell down boards a little bit for me between now and the draft, simply because of the year he had being very rough and college teams showing ways that they can handle him.
Yeah, and standing at 6'6", 280, and he does have a frame that you can actually bulk onto just a little bit, so you could potentially see him move it to the inside. And with the pass rush prowess that he has coming off of the edge, if you could put him at a 5-tech, if he could actually play a 5 technique, or maybe even a 7 technique if you switch to that just a little bit, like the interior pass rush that you could get out of AJ Epinesa, that's probably a big need. Well, with Derek Wolfe and Adam Gotsis and Shelby Harris getting ready to hit the free agency wire, an interior defensive lineman that can create pass rush pressure, up the middle of the offensive line. AJ Epinesa, if you can pack 10 to 15 pounds on him, and like I said, he does have the frame to actually do that, that might be a guy that the Broncos need to look at if they can manage to trade down. Now, moving forward just a little bit, we got Tyler Biadasz, the interior offensive lineman. I believe he's the center for the Wisconsin Badgers. Javon Kinlaw, defensive line from South Carolina, another big disruptor along the interior of the defensive line. Then a guy that a lot of Broncos fans, especially in the Denver area, Colorado Buffaloes fans, wide receiver Laviska Shenault, and one of the most explosive wide receivers that you're going to see. That's your next three. Bryce Hall, the cornerback from Virginia. Out of those four, Shenault would be the guy that I would want to see the Broncos take. That's just my personal opinion. Eric, what do you have on these guys?
So Tyler Biadasz is a center I really like. I like him for Denver a lot. I was going back and forth between him and Creed for my top center, especially for this board and on my personal board. But what put Creed higher was that I just like him better. But Tyler Biadasz, he definitely has a familiarity with the scheme because once Wisconsin runs something similar. With Javon Kinlaw, he reminds me a lot of Kansas City Chiefs defensive lineman Chris Jones. Very athletic, very freakish, able to get a ton of pressure interior on that interior defensive line and get after quarterbacks. Really love his tape, and of this group of guys, that's the guy I want the most. But then you have Laviska Shenault, who plays the wide receiver position kind of like a running back. He's very shifty, will make defenders miss, and he has not great speed, not top end speed, but he's got decent speed to really go pick up yards quickly as well, and just very dynamic receiver. And that's the way the game is going, is you want more dynamic threats at receiver. Bryce Hall, coming into the season, he was my top corner, but the play of Jeff Okudah really dropped him a little bit. But not just that, it was his tackling ability. There's been a lot of issues with his tackling coming up on tape. And Vic Fangio said that tackling is so important that I think that that's going to drop him a little bit. Other than the tackling, he has a perfect scheme fit for what the Broncos want to do, but you got to be able to tackle for this scheme.
Yeah, and tackling as far as a cornerback position, like you said, that's a big key for Vic Fangio, and that was one of the biggest reasons why we saw Kareem Jackson get brought in for this Broncos team, was the big physical presence that he brought in the running game, and we've seen it week in and week out with Kareem Jackson, especially inside the box, coming down and blowing up plays against the run. So with Bryce Hall and the lack of tackling ability and the struggling that he has had as far as tackling in the running game, that's probably going to drop Bryce Hall down the board for the Broncos just a little bit.
I wouldn't be surprised, actually, if the tackling issues persist. And I haven't watched all of Bryce Hall's tape. I've watched maybe about 4, maybe 5 games of his. So I don't know if it's been a consistent issue throughout the season. But if it is, I really wouldn't be surprised, despite him being such a good fit, if Denver ended up taking him off their board, because tackling is that important for the secondary guys in this scheme.
Wow, that's a big indictment. Like, if it's that bad that the Broncos could potentially take him off their board, that's a big indictment for him, not only for the Broncos but for his future as a cornerback long term in the NFL. But guys, we're getting a little bit long here. We're gonna have to take another quick break. Sit tight. We'll be right back. Thanks, guys.
This is the Overtime Podcast Network.
All right, guys, welcome back into Dove Valley Deep Divers, and today, again, we're going over the top 50 board of Erick Trickel and Carl Dumler for the Broncos, the top 50 big board specifically for the Denver Broncos, and we're getting into the latter end of this here and getting away from the guys that the Broncos could potentially be looking at, especially if the struggles continue for this team. We're talking probably top 10, top 12 pick for the Broncos at the very lowest. So right now we're getting into number 21 through 50, and we're just going to kind of throw out some names that the Broncos could probably be looking at towards the top half of the second round here specifically. And a guy that I know that Nick is very high on and Eric has been getting very high on here lately, specifically as an offensive tackle, a left tackle prospect, is Austin Jackson, the left tackle from the USC Trojans. He's been rising up boards very quickly here recently. Now, Eric, what is the biggest thing with Austin Jackson that has him rising up your boards right now?
Just the overall skill. He's very athletic, but he's got a good amount of technical foundation that is going to help his adjustment to the NFL. Because we've seen it in the NFL, you can't just rely on athleticism at the tackle position like you can as in the NFL. So having that technical foundation with him is such a huge boost for him. We're seeing him improve each game, and he's handled some actually really good pass rushers. One of his games that I actually just watched earlier today prior to recording this was his game against the Utah Utes, where he was handling one of my favorite edge rushers in Bradley Anae of the Utes, and he had a really good game there. And just the more I watch of him, the more I like, and I would not be shocked by the time that the draft comes around that he's my number 3 offensive tackle. I really like his tape that much. I just haven't seen enough of him yet to put him that high.
Okay, that's pretty high praise there. But then we're going to move forward here, and like I said, this is going to be pretty quick here. The one that's probably going to tick a lot of Broncos fans off, specifically as like a first round pick, is LSU Tiger safety Grant Delpit. Grant Delpit, you guys have it number 24 overall, and the biggest issue that a lot of people are seeing with right now with Grant Delpit is the fact that he is very poor at tackling, and that is a bit. We just discussed it with Bryce Hall. As far as the tackling ability of the secondary players, Grant Delpit, yeah, he's great in coverage, but with the lack of tackling that he's seen, that's dropping him down the board big time for you guys. Why is that?
It's not just the tackling that's dropping him down a little bit. It's the position he plays. If Denver doesn't bring Justin Simmons back, safety is going to take a huge boost in the need position. Right now, though, they're wanting to get a deal done. They want Justin Simmons back. I wouldn't be surprised if they don't have a deal done, if they slap the franchise tag on him and go from there. They want Justin Simmons back. They want their safety duo of Kareem Jackson and Justin Simmons to stay together. And it's more so for that reason that safeties were a little bit low for us, is because they already have 2 safeties that they want to keep around and have as their safety duo going forward. Grant Delpit, great player, absolutely love him. Probably one of my top 15, if not top 10 players, even with the tackling issues, because he is such a playmaker. But tackling issues and need, just going to see him drop a little bit.
And that's completely fair with the way that Justin Simmons has been playing. And obviously, I kind of highlighted Kareem Jackson there. And he's been a revelation for this Broncos defense, especially coming up in run support at the safety position. But with the way that Justin Simmons has been playing this year, if the Broncos don't bring back Justin Simmons after this year, then yeah, I could definitely see Grant Delpit jump up into the top 10 discussion on this podcast, But there's just not a need right now, and you're absolutely right. Now, moving forward a little bit, we got a guy, Prince Tegawanago, the offensive tackle from the Auburn Tigers. This is a guy that you're very high on. I'm not really a lot about him, but I think he's a little bit raw. Am I wrong?
He is, and this is one where Carl was actually a little bit higher on him than I was. For me personally, he'd be a little bit lower because of how raw he is. Very athletic guy, but the one reason why I kind of caved into Carl on this one a little bit is because the need is there. Denver has to find a tackle. They have to get it, and so the need helped push him up a little bit to help land him where he's at. But yeah, this was very much more so Carl than it was for me. And I'm not trying to throw Carl under the bus by any means. I see why people do like him, but for me, he's just very raw, very athletic, and raw isn't a bad thing, especially if you have an offensive line coach like Mike Munchak. If you're able to develop that, then you could end up with a huge player, a franchise left tackle with him. I see that potential, but it's just very raw, just very reliant on his athleticism right now. So I was a little bit lower for him, but we kind of met in the middle, I guess would be the best way to put it. We kind of met in the middle with him here.
Well, and you see a lot of the issues with raw and unrefined left tackle prospects. And let's go back to another guy that came out of the Auburn program. What was it? 6-7 years ago, in Greg Robinson. Very raw, very athletic, very talented, but he's really been a non-factor for not only the Cleveland Browns and getting rotated out with that team right now, but also with the loss, at the time it would have been the St. Louis Rams when they took him, what was it, second overall. So, I mean, and we're seeing it right now with Garrett Bowles as well. The raw athletic tackle that you have that is very unrefined, and it's such a bust heavy proposition there if you're going to go in that kind of a direction. But moving forward, this is a combination that I've had on a mock draft that I did on the Draft Network's mock machine a couple of weeks ago, where you get the offensive tackle and Tristan Wirfs, and then you look towards the wide receiver position and you take Jalen Reagor from the TCU Horned Frogs. Explosive playmaker, very explosive, very good route runner. He's got a lot of refining to do as far as that goes as a route runner coming with that TCU spread offense. But this is a high upside guy. Eric, what do you think?
I really like him. I like basically the explosion he brings to an offense. One reason why I'm a little bit low on him, his hands aren't consistent. And that's going to be an issue, is because, yes, it's great to get 4 big plays out of him, but if he has 18 drops a game, it can be counterproductive a little bit. I really like him. I like his big playability. I just wish the hands were a little bit more consistent. But real quick, I just want to talk about 2 guys that I absolutely love. They're personal favorites of mine. They are sitting at number 22 and 23 on this board. That's Shaun Wade, a corner from Ohio State. He's a redshirt sophomore, so he could definitely return for this year. And I think that I think that he will, and he can potentially be a top 10 pick next year. I love him. Fits the scheme perfectly. Marvin Wilson, been a big riser on the defensive line from Florida State. He's a guy that I absolutely love for the Broncos defense. Big fan of his, have been for a while. And I would love Denver to land either of these guys, especially Shaun Wade if he decides to come out.
Yeah, and Shaun Wade is a guy that you've been talking about in our private group chat for a couple of weeks now. So he's a name that I'm starting to get myself familiar with. And as you said, as a redshirt sophomore, he has a little bit of growing to do. But the fact that as a redshirt sophomore, he sits at number 22 on your guys' big board, that speaks miles to what you guys think about this young man out of Ohio State. So if he does return back, and you're talking potentially top 10 pick, I do remember Nick actually saying similar things a couple weeks ago as you guys were talking to him about him on the group chat. So if you can get a guy and he does declare, and you can get him, like, say in the second round, say the Broncos, they have 3 third-round picks this year going into the 2020 NFL draft. So if you package a couple of those up, you move up into the second round or the tail end of the first round, you grab yourself a cornerback of the future in Shaun Wade. Now, moving forward just a little bit, we're only going to do the top 30 of this, guys. So the last one that I know the most about would be Raekwon Davis, the Alabama Crimson Tide defensive lineman, interior defensive lineman, and they have been mass-producing interior defensive linemen at Alabama for the past couple of seasons. I mean, Quinnen Williams, obviously. Jonathan Allen, a couple years ago, the Washington Redskins first-round pick. Like, Raekwon Davis is another player in that mold. Probably not as explosive as a pass rusher, but one of the best run defensive players in the entire NFL draft going into the 2020 NFL draft. Eric, what do you think?
I think that's very spot on. I absolutely love him against the run, but his pass rush just hasn't shown up this year, or even last year. He had 8.5 sacks in 2017, but in the last 2 years, he's had 1.5. He has 2.5 sacks between every other year. Granted, he barely played in 2016, where he had 1 full sack. He hasn't had any sacks this year. He's just been playing good against the run, but even then, we're not seeing those big impact plays. He's had 1.5 tackles for a loss this year. So I'm not seeing it. A lot of people are talking about how he's looking so much better on tape, and I'm not seeing it on tape. You're not seeing his production show up on the stat sheet. And while he is helping hold holes open for linebackers to shoot the holes, you want to see him making the big plays more himself as well. And I'm just not seeing it. But the other guys, to round out the top 30 real quick so we can get out of here. Jacob Eason, big arm, Washington quarterback. I've heard a lot of talk about him going back to school this year, so that's something to keep in mind. We'll find out definitely here within the next, probably next few weeks, if not next couple months, before the January deadline, obviously. But he's a guy that I really like, and I could definitely see John Elway being all about it. Paulson Adebo, he's a guy that Carl was a little bit higher on than I am. I think he's more athlete than corner right now. Former wide receiver transitioning, and you can see the flashes of him being a great corner, just not the consistency. Then Xavier McKinney, a safety from Alabama. Very toolsy guy, versatile guy, but it's just like Grant Delpit. The need for safety is not there. That pushed him down a little bit. And Xavier McKinney, he's definitely a guy that if they need a safety, I could definitely see Denver being interested in him because of the versatility that he brings to the defense, because he's able to do so many different things.
Awesome. But dude, this is enlightening, not only for all of our listeners, but also for me, because I mean, you guys do such a great job as far as researching into these prospects and trying to teach everybody. And I mean, you guys are always putting out draft content on Mile High Huddle, some of the best content you guys are going to read. And you specifically, Eric, go into in depth in a way that most professional teams don't even go. I mean, you build like a top 300 big board, your top 300 players. Most teams only go about 150, and then after that, it's just trust your scouting department and actually learn. So we're getting great information from you guys, and just for me to be able to use this conversation with you to actually build up a little bit more of a knowledge than what I already do have is so amazing. And I thank you for having this conversation with me today, man. I really do. But guys, that's going to do it for us today. We're going to wrap it up here. Thank you all once again for joining us on the Dove Valley Deep Divers podcast. You guys can follow us both on Twitter by finding me at Sanderson MHH and for Eric at Erick Trickel. Also be sure to follow at Mile High Huddle and at Huddle Up Pod for the podcast network. Every article that is written for Mile High Huddle is published on the Huddle website and then also published on the Twitter handle. So you guys have instant access to every Broncos article instantaneously. You guys can also like Mile High Huddle's Facebook page as well, where we do the exact same thing. We love and appreciate all of your guys' support, and if not for you all, we wouldn't have the opportunity to do what we do best. So until next time, Denver Broncos country, stay safe and take care. Y'all have a good day. Thanks.